I am Bradley, 34 years old, and never expected my grandmother's final gift would tear my family apart. When she left me her modest house, I thought it was a simple inheritance. Instead, it unleashed a storm of entitlement, revealing my sister's lifestyle coaching delusions and my mother's enabling desperation. What followed was 4 months of manipulation, legal threats, and family betrayal that changed everything. If you are watching this story, drop a comment, letting me know where you are viewing from. Hit that like button and subscribe, because family inheritance dramas like mine might teach you something about protecting yourself when money suddenly brings out the worst in those closest to you. My grandmother Rose was the steady anchor in my life since childhood. While my parents worked long hours, she was the one who picked me up from school, made sure I did my homework, and taught me the value of hard work. Our bond was special from the beginning. Every summer when school let out, I would spend weeks at her house learning how to garden, fix things around the house, and cook meals from scratch. Our relationship stood in stark contrast to how my sister Stephanie interacted with our grandmother. 3 years younger than me, Stephanie always found Grandma's house boring, and her lessons about saving money and living within your means to be outdated. Stephanie was always chasing the next big thing, bouncing from one potential career breakthrough to another. By the time she was 20, she had already cycled through aspirations of becoming a model, a social media influencer, a day trader, and briefly a multi-level marketing sales director for essential oils. Grandma Rose lived in a modest 3-bedroom house in a quiet neighborhood. It was not fancy by any means, but it was paid off decades ago and had been her home for over 50 years. The kitchen had the same linoleum floor from the 1970s, and the wallpaper in the dining room featured tiny blue flowers that had faded over time, but everything was immaculately maintained. The yard was her pride and joy, with rose bushes she had tenderly cared for since before I was born. As I grew into adulthood, I made it a point to visit Grandma Rose every weekend. I would bring groceries, fix whatever needed repairing, and simply sit with her on the porch swing, listening to stories about her youth. During these visits, Stephanie was notably absent. She would call occasionally on holidays or birthdays, but rarely made the 30-minute drive to visit in person. When Grandma turned 85, her health began to decline. I increased my visits to twice weekly, making sure she took her medications properly and helping her with increasingly difficult daily tasks. During this time, my mother Carol would occasionally visit, but she was always distracted, often spending most of the visit on her phone. My father Thomas would come with her, sometimes quiet and supportive, but not particularly close to his mother-in-law. Stephanie called more frequently during this period, but her calls invariably ended with requests for loans to fund her latest venture. Grandma would sometimes give her small amounts despite my concerns, saying family helps family. I noticed, however, that these gifts became less frequent as Grandma began to see the pattern of Stephanie never following through with her business ideas. During the last few months of her life, Grandma and I had several meaningful conversations that I will treasure forever. She told me how proud she was of the stable life I had built as an accountant. She appreciated that I had saved for my own modest house, instead of renting a luxury apartment I could not afford, unlike Stephanie. "You understand the value of things earned through hard work," she told me one evening. "That matters more than you know." When Grandma Rose passed away peacefully in her sleep, I was devastated. She had been more than a grandmother to me. She had been a parent, a teacher, and a friend. The funeral was small but beautiful, with roses from her own garden decorating the casket. 3 days after the funeral, we gathered at the office of Grandma's attorney for the reading of the will. I expected her modest savings to be divided equally between Stephanie and me, with perhaps some personal items designated for specific family members. What I never anticipated was that Grandma had left her entire house to me alone, along with all its contents and her savings account containing $32,000. The attorney explained that Grandma had updated her will 8 months prior, after Stephanie had not visited her in the hospital following a fall. The silence in the room was deafening as the attorney finished reading. Stephanie's face transformed from solemn grief to stunned disbelief, then to undisguised anger. My mother gasped audibly and glared at me as though I had somehow engineered this outcome. My father simply stared at his hands, his expression unreadable. As we left the attorney's office, I tried to speak to Stephanie, but she brushed past me. "Congratulations on the windfall," she said bitterly. "Must be nice to be the favorite." Before I could respond, she was in her car, speeding away. My mother looked at me with disappointment clear in her eyes. "We need to talk about this, Bradley," she said firmly. "This is not what family does to each other." My father merely patted my shoulder and led my mother to their car, leaving me standing alone clutching the key to Grandma's house that was now somehow mine. The days following the will reading were filled with uncomfortable silence from my family. I tried calling both my mother and Stephanie several times, but my calls went straight to voicemail. My father texted briefly that they needed time to process and asked me to give them space. Respecting their request, I focused on the practical matters of my unexpected inheritance. Entering Grandma's house now legally, my house felt surreal. Everything remained exactly as she had left it, from the half-finished crossword puzzle on the kitchen table to her reading glasses folded neatly beside her favorite armchair. The familiar scent of her lavender sachets still lingered in the air. I moved through the room slowly, memories flooding back with each step. This was not just a piece of real estate to me. It was a sanctuary filled with the spirit of the woman who had shaped me into the person I am today. A week after the will reading, my mother finally called and insisted we have a family dinner at their house to discuss the situation. Her tone made it clear this was not optional. When I arrived that Sunday, the atmosphere was tense. Stephanie sat at the dining table, scrolling through her phone and barely acknowledging my presence. My father busied himself with grilling steaks in the backyard, clearly trying to stay out of whatever was coming. "So," my mother began once we were all seated with our food, "I think we need to talk about what would be fair regarding Rose's estate." She emphasized the word fair while looking pointedly at me. "The will was pretty clear, Mom," I said quietly. "Grandma made her wishes known legally." Stephanie scoffed. "Oh, please. We all know you manipulated her when she was old and vulnerable, spending all that time with her playing the devoted grandson while the rest of us had actual lives to lead." "That is not what happened," I replied, keeping my voice level despite the accusation. "I visited her because I wanted to, not because I expected anything." Well, intentions aside, my mother interjected, "The fact remains that this situation has created a significant imbalance between siblings. Your grandmother would have wanted you both to be treated equally." "Then why did she explicitly leave everything to me?" I asked. "She updated her will when she was completely sound of mind, Mom." The attorney confirmed that. My father, who had been silent until now, finally spoke up. "Carol Rose had her reasons. We should respect her wishes." My mother shot him a look that could have frozen water. "Thomas, stay out of this. This is about making things right for our children." The rest of the dinner continued in this vein, with subtle and not so subtle suggestions that I should sell the house and split the proceeds with Stephanie. By the time dessert was served, I had been called selfish, manipulative, and ungrateful. My father occasionally tried to diffuse the situation, but was quickly silenced by my mother. As I drove home that night, a complicated mix of emotions swirled inside me. Grief for my grandmother, guilt over the rift in the family, and a growing sense of anger that they could not respect Grandma's clearly stated wishes. Still, part of me wondered if there was some truth to their accusations. Had I somehow influenced Grandma's decision without realizing it? The next morning, I decided to go through some of Grandma's personal papers, hoping to find clarity. In her bedroom dresser, beneath neatly folded scarves, I discovered a small wooden box containing letters and photographs. Among them was an envelope addressed to me in Grandma's distinctive handwriting. With trembling hands, I opened it. "My dear Bradley," the letter began, "if you are reading this, then I am gone, and you have inherited my home. I want you to know this decision was made with full clarity and purpose. This house has been my sanctuary for 50 years, and I cannot bear the thought of it being sold to strangers, or worse, liquidated to fund one of Stephanie's impulsive ventures. You have shown true appreciation for what matters in life, and I trust you to honor the legacy of this home, whether you choose to live in it or eventually sell it when the time is right for you. Please, do not let anyone make you feel guilty about my choice. With all my love, Grandma Rose." The letter brought tears to my eyes, but also a sense of resolve. Grandma had made her decision consciously and with specific intent. I needed to honor that despite the family pressure. 2 days later, Stephanie showed up unannounced at the house. Her demeanor had changed dramatically. Gone was the open hostility, replaced by an almost unnervingly cheerful attitude. "Hey, big brother," she said, hugging me for the first time in years. "I just wanted to apologize for how I acted at dinner. It was a shock, you know. But I have been thinking, and I realize Grandma must have had her reasons." Suspicious of this sudden change, I invited her in cautiously. Stephanie wandered through the house, commenting on various items and reminiscing about Grandma in a way she never had when Rose was alive. "You know," she said casually as we sat in the living room, "this place has so much potential. Have you thought about what you are going to do with it? It must be weird living in Grandma's house with all her old stuff." "I am still figuring that out," I answered honestly. "I might move in eventually, but right now, I am just taking my time sorting through everything." Stephanie nodded sympathetically. "That makes sense. But you know, real estate in this area has really gone up. This place could probably sell for at least $300,000 in this market, maybe more with some minor updates." And there it was, the real reason for her visit. As she continued to outline the financial benefits of selling, I realized this reconciliation was nothing more than a new tactic to get what she wanted. The pressure had simply taken a different form. "I am not selling, Stephanie," I said, firmly interrupting her mid-sentence. "This house was Grandma's gift to me, and I intend to honor her wishes by keeping it, at least for now." Her friendly facade cracked slightly. "But Bradley, be reasonable. What are you going to do with a house this size? You already have your own place. Meanwhile, I could really use the capital to finally get my life on track." When I remained firm in my refusal, Stephanie left with a thinly veiled warning. "Mom is really upset about this, you know. This is not over." As her car pulled away, I knew the battle for Grandma's house was just beginning. 3 days after Stephanie's unexpected visit, she called and asked to meet for coffee to clear the air. Hoping for genuine reconciliation, I agreed. We met at a small cafe downtown, and for the first 15 minutes the conversation remained superficially pleasant. Stephanie asked about my job and commented on the weather, avoiding any mention of the inheritance. Just as I was beginning to think this might be a real peace offering, Stephanie's expression grew serious. "Bradley, I want to share something exciting with you," she said, pulling out a glossy brochure from her purse. "I have found my true calling." The brochure featured images of attractive, well-dressed people speaking to captivated audiences in luxurious settings. Bold text proclaimed transform lives as a certified lifestyle coach to the elite. According to Stephanie, this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to join an exclusive coaching certification program that would position her to work with celebrities and corporate executives. "The program is incredibly selective," she explained, her eyes shining with enthusiasm. "Only 30 people nationwide are accepted each quarter." I applied on a whim, never expecting to get in, but they called yesterday to say they were impressed with my application and personal story. As she continued, the catch became clear. This elite program costs $30,000 for a 12-week certification. "It is an investment in my future," Stephanie insisted. Within 6 months of certification, graduates typically earn 6 figures annually. Some are making over $500,000 within 2 years. "That sounds too good to be true," I said cautiously. "Have you researched this company thoroughly?" Stephanie dismissed my concerns with a wave of her hand. "Of course I have. The founder was featured in a podcast last year. She coaches actual Hollywood celebrities, Bradley. This is legitimate." When I asked about financing options, Stephanie's real agenda emerged. "Well, that is kind of why I wanted to talk to you. The program starts in 3 weeks, and they need the full payment up front to secure my spot." She reached across the table to grasp my hand. "Bradley, this is my chance to finally build something real. If you sold Grandma's house, you could give me the $30,000 for the program, keep some for yourself, and still have plenty left over." I withdrew my hand, disappointment settling heavily in my chest. "So this is not about clearing the air at all. It is about the house again." "No, it is about family supporting each other," Stephanie countered. "Grandma would have wanted to see me succeed. You know, she always encouraged us to follow our dreams." After returning home, I spent hours researching this elite coaching program. What I discovered was concerning. The company had been in business for only 18 months. Their Instagram featured the same 3 success stories repeatedly. Several posts contained stock photos I found on multiple websites. The founder had indeed been on a podcast, but it was a self-produced show with minimal listeners. Most troublingly, I found several complaints on consumer protection websites from people who had completed the program and received worthless certifications not recognized by any legitimate professional organization. I called Stephanie the next day to share my findings, but she refused to listen. "You are just trying to sabotage me because you cannot stand to see me succeed," she accused before hanging up. That weekend, my parents invited me to dinner again. I should have known something was up when my mother mentioned she had invited Stephanie as well. This time, the atmosphere was entirely different. My mother was unusually attentive, serving my favorite foods and asking interested questions about my work. My father seemed relieved by the change in tone, contributing to the conversation more than usual. After dessert was served, my mother cleared her throat. "Bradley, Stephanie has told us about this amazing opportunity she has been offered. We are so proud of her for finding her path." Stephanie beamed, launching into an even more exaggerated version of the coaching program's benefits than she had shared with me. My mother nodded along enthusiastically, while my father looked less convinced but remained supportive. "The thing is," my mother continued, "we have been discussing as a family how we can help Stephanie take advantage of this opportunity. Your father and I can contribute some, but with our retirement savings being what they are." "What your mother is trying to say," my father interjected, "is that we were hoping you might consider using some of your inheritance to help your sister." "I have already told Stephanie I am not selling Grandma's house," I said firmly. "No one is asking you to sell right away," my mother countered smoothly. "You could take out a home equity loan. The house is paid off, so you would qualify instantly. $30,000 is nothing compared to the value of the property." I looked at them incredulously. "You want me to take out a loan against Grandma's house to fund a questionable coaching program? Have any of you actually researched this company?" "I have done extensive research," Stephanie insisted. "Just because you found some negative reviews online does not mean anything. Every successful company has critics." The dinner devolved from there, with my mother and Stephanie tag-teaming their persuasion efforts. My father remained largely silent, occasionally throwing me apologetic glances. By the end of the evening, it was clear that they had coordinated this approach in advance, likely rehearsing how to best pressure me into financing Stephanie's latest scheme. The pressure did not stop after that dinner. Over the next 2 weeks, I received daily calls from both Stephanie and my mother. They began showing up at my apartment, unannounced always, with new angles on why I should help fund this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. My mother even enlisted my Aunt Linda, her sister, to call me and emphasize how selfish I was being. During one particularly tense phone call, my mother revealed something that shocked me. "We have already put down a $5,000 deposit to hold Stephanie's spot in the program," she admitted. "We took out a personal loan to do it. The balance is due in 10 days, Bradley. If you do not help, we will lose that money entirely." "Why would you do that without knowing if I would contribute?" I asked, genuinely baffled. "Because we believed you would do the right thing for your sister," she replied coldly. "Apparently we were wrong." That evening I drove to Grandma's house to clear my head. As I sat on the porch swing, I remembered all the conversations Grandma and I had shared in that very spot. She had always emphasized making thoughtful decisions rather than impulsive ones, evaluating opportunities carefully, and never borrowing money you were not certain you could repay. What would she advise me to do now? The answer came clearly as I remembered her letter. She had specifically mentioned not wanting her home liquidated to fund one of Stephanie's impulsive ventures. This coaching program was exactly the type of scheme she had been concerned about. The next day, I called my mother and firmly declined to provide the money. "I have researched this program thoroughly, Mom. It is not legitimate. I would be doing Stephanie no favors by funding this." "Then you leave us no choice," my mother replied ominously. "If you will not help your sister voluntarily, we will need to explore other options." I did not know what she meant by other options, but I would soon find out. The following Sunday, I received a text message from my mother family, "Meeting at our house today at 3. Everyone will be there. Please do not make this more difficult than it needs to be." When I arrived, I was surprised to find not just my parents and Stephanie, but also my Aunt Linda, my Uncle Paul, and 2 of my cousins. My grandmother's sister, my great-aunt Margaret, sat in the corner looking uncomfortable. My mother had arranged what she called a family intervention. One by one, each family member took turns, explaining why I should do the right thing and help Stephanie with her coaching program. They had clearly been prepped with talking points, as several used nearly identical phrases about family obligation and what Rose would have wanted. Most disturbing was how the narrative had shifted. According to my relatives, I had somehow manipulated my elderly grandmother into changing her will, isolating her from the rest of the family in her final months. My Aunt Linda went so far as to suggest I had elder abuse tendencies, a comment so outrageous that even my father objected. "That is completely unfair, Linda," he said firmly. "Bradley was the only one consistently visiting Rose in her final years. If anything, the rest of us should have been more present." This rare show of support from my father was quickly shut down by my mother. "Thomas, we agreed about how this meeting would go," she said sharply. Great Aunt Margaret, who had remained silent throughout, suddenly spoke up. "I visited Rose 2 weeks before she passed," she said quietly. "She told me exactly why she was leaving the house to Bradley. She was of sound mind and made her own decisions. This meeting is inappropriate." With that, she stood up, patted my shoulder supportively, and left, ignoring my mother's protests. After the intervention failed to change my mind, the tactics escalated. Stephanie began telling mutual friends and extended family members that I was withholding her rightful inheritance out of spite. Social media posts appeared with vague references to toxic family members and overcoming obstacles to pursue dreams. Several distant relatives and family friends contacted me, concerned about what they had heard. One evening, I drove by Grandma's house to check on things and noticed an unfamiliar car in the driveway. When I pulled in, I found Stephanie's boyfriend, Troy, a part-time real estate agent, walking through the backyard with a middle-aged couple. Troy had been dating Stephanie for about 8 months and had always struck me as opportunistic and frequently discussing get-rich, quick investment schemes and boasting about deals that never seemed to materialize. "What is going on here?" I demanded, approaching the group. Troy smiled broadly, not at all embarrassed at being caught. "Bradley, perfect timing. This is the Johnsons. They are very interested in the property and have made a competitive offer." I was stunned. "This house is not for sale. How did you even get in?" The couple looked confused. "We were told the property was coming on the market next week," Mrs. Johnson said. "Mr. Miller has been showing us several houses in the neighborhood." "I am sorry, but you have been misinformed," I told them firmly. "This house belongs to me and is absolutely not for sale. I would appreciate if you would leave now." After the couple departed, Troy's friendly demeanor vanished. "You are making a huge mistake, Bradley. Stephanie told me all about how you manipulated your grandmother. That will not hold up if challenged legally. You should take the offer while it is on the table." "How did you get into this house, Troy?" I demanded again. He shrugged. "Your mom had a spare key from when Rose was alive. She thought it would be helpful for me to get a head start on evaluating the property's market potential." I was furious. "Get off my property now, or I will call the police for trespassing." That evening, I had the locks changed on all the doors and installed a basic security system. I also placed motion-activated cameras at the front and back entrances. The violation of having Troy showing my house to strangers without permission felt deeply personal, as if they were not just trying to take the property, but erase Grandma's presence from it as well. The next day, my mother called irate. "How dare you change the locks without telling us? What if there had been an emergency?" "What emergency would require you to enter the house without my knowledge?" Mom, I asked. "And why did you give Troy a key to show the house to potential buyers when you know it is not for sale?" "We were just exploring options," she said defensively. "Stephanie's program starts next week and the full payment is due. We are trying to secure a bridge loan, but having a potential buyer lined up would help expedite things." "A bridge loan?" For what I asked, confused. "You cannot take out a loan against a house you do not own." There was a long pause. "Your father and I are considering a second mortgage on our house," she finally admitted. "But it would be so much simpler if you would just cooperate." I was speechless. My parents were considering putting their own financial security at risk to fund Stephanie's dubious coaching program. The manipulation had reached a new level now, attempting to make me feel responsible for my parents' potentially disastrous financial decision. Later that week, Stephanie escalated further by having a lawyer friend send me a threatening letter suggesting that I had exerted undue influence over Grandma and demanding that I rectify the situation by selling the house and dividing the Bisingasuuf proceeds. The letter was full of legal jargon but contained no actual legal claims that would stand up in court. When I did not respond to the letter, my mother called in tears. "Bradley, your sister is inconsolable. She had to forfeit her spot in the program because the payment deadline passed. My blood pressure is through the roof from all this stress. The doctor says I need to avoid conflict, but how can I when my son is tearing the family apart?" The emotional manipulation was transparent, but it still hurt to hear my mother speak this way. I had always been the good son, the responsible one who avoided conflict and tried to keep everyone happy. Now I was being cast as the villain for simply respecting my grandmother's wishes. The final straw came when I checked the mailbox at Grandma's house and found a real estate listing agreement with my forged signature. The document prepared by Troy's brokerage authorized him to list and sell the property. The signature looked nothing like mine, but it was a clear attempt to move forward with selling the house without my consent. This was no longer just family pressure. It was fraud. The forged listing agreement pushed me to take legal action. I contacted an attorney specializing in estate law and explained the situation, bringing all documentation, including Grandma's will, her personal letter to me, and the fraudulent listing agreement. "This is fairly straightforward from a legal perspective," my attorney Rachel Barnes explained after reviewing everything. "The will is clear and was properly executed while your grandmother was of sound mind. There are no grounds for contesting it based on what you have shared. As for the forged document, that is a serious matter that could have criminal implications for whoever signed your name." On Rachel's advice, I sent a formal cease and desist letter to Stephanie Troy and Troy's real estate brokerage explicitly stating that the house was not for sale and any attempts to market or sell it were unauthorized. I also included a clear warning that the forged document had been documented and would be reported to the State Real Estate Commission and potentially law enforcement if any further attempts were made. The response was swift and volatile. Stephanie called me screaming, accusing me of trying to ruin Troy's career and threatening vague legal consequences. My mother left a voicemail saying she could not believe I would go this far and that my grandmother would be ashamed of my behavior. Most surprisingly, my father called separately. "Bradley, things have gotten out of hand," he said, sounding tired. "Your mother does not know I am calling. She has become obsessed with this situation, and I am worried about her. Her blood pressure really is elevated, and the doctor has expressed concern about her stress levels." "I am sorry to hear that, Dad," I replied sincerely. "But I cannot just give in to their demands because Mom is upset. Stephanie and Troy tried to forge my signature on a legal document. That is fraud." "I know," he acknowledged quietly. "I found out about that last night and confronted both of them. Troy claims it was just a misunderstanding, but I do not believe him. Your mother, however, is making excuses for them. She has convinced herself that you are the problem." My father's call left me with mixed emotions. I was grateful for his tacit support, but frustrated that he still seemed unwilling to take a firm stand against what Stephanie and my mother were doing. A few days later, I stopped by Grandma's house to drop off some cleaning supplies and noticed immediately that something was wrong. The curio cabinet in the dining room, which had held Grandma's collection of porcelain figurines, was half empty. Several picture frames were missing from the walls, and the antique silver tea service that had been in the family for generations was gone from the sideboard. I went through the house, room by room, creating an inventory of missing items. The list was substantial and included several valuable pieces of jewelry, a small oil painting by a local artist that had some value, and numerous family heirlooms with primarily sentimental significance. The selective nature of what was taken made it clear this was not a random break-in. Checking the security camera footage confirmed my suspicions. 3 days earlier, my mother and Stephanie had entered using a key I did not know existed, likely a copy made before I changed the locks. The footage showed them systematically going through the house, selecting items and loading them into tote bags. Their expressions and body language were businesslike, without any sign of emotional attachment to what they were taking. I called my attorney immediately. On her advice, I filed a police report about the missing items, providing the security footage as evidence. I also sent formal letters to both my mother and Stephanie, demanding the return of all items taken from the house within 48 hours or legal action would follow. The police officer who took the report was sympathetic, but explained that family disputes over inheritance often fell into gray areas legally. The fact that you have video evidence helps, he noted. But they will likely claim these items were promised to them verbally, which complicates things. Stephanie responded to my letter with a text message. Those things should have been mine anyway. Consider it partial payment for what you owe me. My mother did not respond at all. My father, however, showed up at my apartment that evening looking distressed. Bradley, I had no idea they had taken things from the house, he said. Your mother told me Stephanie was just collecting a few personal mementos of Rose, which seemed reasonable. I never imagined they were taking valuable items. Did you know about the real estate fraud too? I asked directly. He looked down ashamed. I suspected something was not right when Troy started talking about listing the house. I should have said something then, but your mother was so set on this plan. I convinced myself it was just exploratory, not an actual attempt to sell without your consent. Dad, you have to stop enabling this behavior, I said firmly. Mom and Stephanie are crossing serious legal and ethical lines now. He nodded slowly. I know. That is why I brought these. He handed me a box containing most of the missing jewelry and the silver tea service. I found them hidden in our storage room. I cannot get everything back right now without your mother knowing, but I will work on it. This partial return of items was a small victory, but the situation had clearly reached a breaking point. My attorney advised me to cut off direct communication with Stephanie, and my mother directing any necessary contact through her. She also helped me draft a comprehensive legal notice, establishing clear boundaries, no entering the property without explicit permission, no removal of any items, no attempts to market or sell the house, and no further harassment or defamation regarding the inheritance. If they violate these terms, Rachel explained, we will have grounds for more serious legal action, including potential restraining orders if the harassment continues. The legal notice was delivered by courier to both my mother and Stephanie. The immediate response was a barrage of text messages from Stephanie, ranging from furious accusations to tearful pleas which I documented but did not respond to. My mother called repeatedly until I blocked her number on the advice of my attorney. My father reported that the legal notice had thrown my mother into a state of indignant outrage. She is talking about contesting the will now, he said wearily. She has convinced herself that Rose must not have been mentally competent when she changed it. The attorney who prepared the will had Grandma evaluated specifically to prevent such challenges, I replied. It will not work, Dad. I know, he sighed, but she will not listen to reason. Bradley, I think I need to step back from this situation for a while. I love your mother, but I cannot support what she and Stephanie are doing. I have suggested counseling, but she refused. My father's decision to distance himself from their schemes was perhaps the clearest sign that the family dynamic had fundamentally changed. For years, he had been the peacekeeper, smoothing over conflicts and supporting my mother and Stephanie, even when he disagreed with their actions. His withdrawal of that automatic support represented a seismic shift. The next few weeks passed in tense silence. Through mutual friends, I heard that Stephanie had gone ahead with the coaching certification program, somehow securing the money despite my refusal to contribute. My mother had apparently cashed out a retirement account early, incurring substantial penalties to provide the remaining funds after their personal loan and second mortgage. From a legal perspective, things had reached a stalemate. Stephanie and my mother had no legitimate claim to the house or its contents, but the emotional damage to our family relationship seemed irreparable. What had begun as disagreement over an inheritance had revealed deeper issues of entitlement, manipulation, and unhealthy family dynamics that had likely been present for years. As difficult as it was, I realized that sometimes maintaining boundaries was more important than maintaining peace. Grandma had entrusted her home to me for specific reasons, and honoring her wishes meant standing firm against the pressure, manipulation, and even illegal actions my family had undertaken to subvert those wishes. 4 months passed with no contact from my mother or Stephanie. At my attorney's recommendation, I maintained the security system at Grandma's house, and documented any attempts at contact, but there were none. The silence was both a relief and a sadness. I had never imagined becoming estranged from half my family over an inheritance, but their actions had left me no choice. During this time, I finally began the process of truly making Grandma's house my own. I moved in, gradually bringing my belongings over in stages while carefully preserving the elements of the house that made it special. I repainted some rooms but kept her kitchen exactly as it was, down to the vintage floral curtains she had sewn herself decades ago. The garden became my weekend project, and I took pride in keeping her beloved roses thriving. My father visited occasionally, always calling ahead to respect my boundaries. He seemed lighter somehow, as if stepping back from the conflict had freed him from a burden he had carried for years. We never discussed my mother or Stephanie directly, but he mentioned that things at home were complicated and left it at that. Then came the chance encounter that changed everything. I was shopping at Target one evening when I rounded the corner of an aisle and nearly collided with someone stocking shelves. When we both looked up, I found myself face to face with Stephanie, wearing a red Target uniform shirt. The shock on her face mirrored my own. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she straightened up and said flatly, "I would appreciate if you did not mention seeing me here to anyone." "I have not spoken to Mom in 4 months," I replied, "or anyone else in the family besides Dad." She seemed surprised by this. "Really?" She told me you two were in regular contact. Before I could respond, a supervisor called Stephanie's name, and she quickly excused herself, disappearing down the aisle. The encounter lasted less than a minute, but it left me with questions. Why was Stephanie working at Target? What had happened to her coaching career? And why had my mother lied about being in contact with me? 2 days later, I received an unexpected call from a family friend, Barbara, who had been close to my grandmother. "Bradley, I ran into your father at the grocery store," she began. "He mentioned you and he are back in touch, but that things with Carol and Stephanie are still difficult. I hope you do not mind me calling, but I thought you should know what I have heard." According to Barbara, Stephanie's coaching business had failed spectacularly before it even began. After completing the 12-week certification program, she had rented an expensive office space and invested thousands in marketing materials, professional photos, and a website, but no clients materialized. The promised connections to elite and celebrity clients never materialized, and the certification turned out to be unrecognized by any legitimate professional organization, exactly as I had warned. "The real bombshell," Barbara continued, "is that your mother is apparently filing for bankruptcy. The loans they took out for Stephanie's business venture, combined with the second mortgage and some credit card debt, became unmanageable. Your father moved out temporarily about a month ago. He is staying with his brother while they sort things out." I thanked Barbara for the information, feeling a complex mix of vindication and sadness. I had been right about the coaching program being a scam, but taking no pleasure in being right under these circumstances. I called my father that evening, and he confirmed everything Barbara had told me. "I tried to warn them both," he said, sounding exhausted. "But your mother was so certain this was going to be Stephanie's big break. When it fell apart, they both blamed the economy, the market, the certification program, even me for not being supportive enough, never themselves for making poor decisions." "What about the bankruptcy?" I asked. "It is necessary," he sighed. "Carol took out more loans than I knew about. When I discovered the full extent of the debt, I insisted on meeting with a financial advisor. That is when we learned how dire the situation really is. The bankruptcy filing is in process, but it is going to mean selling our house." "Dad, I am so sorry," I said sincerely. "Do not be," he replied with surprising firmness. "This has been coming for years. Your mother and Stephanie have a pattern of magical thinking when it comes to money. I enabled it for too long. In a strange way, this whole situation with your inheritance brought everything to a head that might have continued indefinitely otherwise." A week later, I learned through my attorney that Troy had lost his real estate license. The State Real Estate Commission had investigated the forged listing agreement after his brokerage reported it wanting to distance themselves from potential liability. According to the ruling, this was not Troy's first ethical violation, but it was the one that finally cost him his career. Stephanie and Troy broke up shortly after, with Troy blaming her for his professional downfall. My father reported that Stephanie had moved back in with my mother, both of them now living in a small apartment after being forced to sell the family home I had grown up in. The most surprising development came nearly 5 months after the initial inheritance conflict began. My father called to ask if he could come by Grandma's house to talk. When he arrived, he seemed nervous, but determined. "Bradley, I owe you an apology," he began as we sat on the porch, swing the same spot where Grandma and I had shared so many conversations. "I should have stood up to your mother and Stephanie from the beginning. I knew what they were doing was wrong, but I fell into my old pattern of trying to keep the peace at any cost." "You did stand up eventually, Dad," I reminded him. "You brought back the items they took and you refused to support the fraud." "Too little, too late," he said sadly. "If I had been firmer years ago, maybe Stephanie would not have developed such unrealistic expectations about money and success. Maybe your mother would not have enabled her so consistently. I failed both of them by not setting better boundaries." We talked for hours that evening, having the most honest conversation we had ever shared. My father revealed patterns in my parents' marriage that I had never fully understood as a child. How my mother had always favored Stephanie, seeing her as an extension of herself and her own unrealized ambitions. How he had compensated by trying to protect me in subtle ways while never directly challenging the favoritism. "Your grandmother saw it all clearly," he told me. "She told me once that she was leaving the house to you because you were the only one who would value it for what it was, not what it could be converted into. I think she also knew you were strong enough to withstand the pressure that would follow." As my father prepared to leave, he asked if he could visit the rose garden. We walked together in silence, admiring the late blooms that still added color to the autumn garden. "You have kept it up beautifully," he said, genuine appreciation in his voice. "Rose would be proud." "You are always welcome here, Dad," I told him. "This is still your family home, too." He smiled sadly. "Maybe someday. Right now, I need to figure out my own path forward. Your mother and I are technically separated, but I have not decided about divorce yet. She blames you for everything that has happened, and I cannot be caught in the middle anymore." As he drove away, I realized that while I had lost part of my family, I had perhaps gained something equally valuable: clarity about who they really were and who I wanted to be. Healing from family betrayal is neither quick nor linear. In the months that followed the complete rupture with my mother and sister, I experienced waves of anger, grief, guilt, and finally acceptance. The house that had been the center of so much conflict became my sanctuary, a place to process these complicated emotions and begin rebuilding my sense of family on my own terms. I started by establishing new routines and traditions in the house. Sunday mornings became my time for tending Grandma's roses just as she had done. I learned through trial and error about pruning techniques and pest management, sometimes imagining I could hear her gentle corrections when I made mistakes. In the northwest corner of the backyard, I created a small memorial garden with a stone bench where I could sit and feel connected to her memory. The renovation of the house became a form of therapy. I preserved what was meaningful, like the handmade kitchen curtains and the carefully maintained hardwood floors, while gradually updating other elements to reflect my own taste. Each change was considered carefully, a balance between honoring Grandma's legacy and making the space truly mine. My father visited more frequently as time passed. He had found an apartment of his own and was slowly building an independent life. He brought plants for the garden and helped with renovation projects, our relationship strengthening through shared work and honest conversations. The rift with my mother had forced him to confront patterns in their marriage that had been unhealthy for decades. I always thought keeping the peace was the same as being a good husband and father, he confessed one day as we installed new bathroom fixtures. Now I realize that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is stand firm against harmful behavior, even when it creates conflict. We never discussed reconciliation with my mother or Stephanie directly, but the topic hovered in the background of our conversations. My father occasionally shared updates about their situations, which continued to deteriorate. My mother's bankruptcy had been finalized with significant financial consequences that would follow her for years. Stephanie had moved out of my mother's apartment after a series of arguments and was now sharing a place with 3 roommates, still working at Target, but telling everyone it was just temporary until her next big opportunity. Troy, I learned, had left the state after losing his real estate license, allegedly owing money to several former clients and associates. His parting gift to Stephanie had been significant debt on joint credit cards they had opened together, further complicating her financial situation. 6 months after our estrangement began, I received a text message from Stephanie. I might have been wrong about some things. Can we talk? After consulting with both my therapist and my father, I agreed to meet her at a neutral location, a coffee shop downtown. The Stephanie who arrived was markedly different from the entitled, aggressive sister I had faced during the inheritance conflict. She looked tired, her designer clothes replaced by simple jeans and a plain sweater. When she spoke, the artificial enthusiasm that had characterized her coaching ambitions was gone. I owe you an apology. She began, staring into her coffee cup rather than meeting my eyes. I convinced myself that Grandma's house should have been partly mine, that you had somehow manipulated her. It was easier than admitting I was jealous of your relationship with her. I listened silently as she continued explaining how the coaching certification had been a complete scam. The exclusive program had turned out to be little more than a series of recorded webinars and PDF handouts, with none of the promised networking opportunities or business support. Her attempt to launch a coaching business had failed within weeks, leaving her with nothing to show for the $30,000 investment except debt. Mom still blames you for everything, she admitted. She cannot accept that we made bad decisions. But I have had time to think, especially after Troy left me with all that debt. I started wondering if maybe you were right to be cautious all along. While I appreciated her acknowledgement, I remained guarded. What are you hoping for from this conversation, Stephanie? I asked directly. She looked uncomfortable. Honestly, I do not know. Not money, if that is what you are worried about. I miss having a family. Mom is impossible to be around now, constantly bitter and looking for someone to blame. Dad seems happier away from all the drama, and I realized I do not have anyone else. We talked for nearly 2 hours, more honestly than we had in years. I shared how hurt I had been by her attempts to take Grandma's house through manipulation and fraud. She admitted to participating in the forged document scheme, though she claimed it had been Troy's idea initially. Neither of us mentioned reconciliation directly, but we agreed to remain in cautious contact, starting with occasional text messages. As spring arrived, I completed the major renovations on the house and held a small gathering to celebrate. My father came along with a few close friends and neighbors who had known my grandmother. It felt right to fill the house with laughter and new memories while still honoring its history. My father brought an unexpected gift that day, a box of old photographs he had rescued during the sale of their house. Among them was a picture I had never seen before of Grandma Rose, as a young woman standing proudly in front of her newly purchased house, her whole life ahead of her. She bought this place on her own, you know, my father told me. After your grandfather died young, everyone told her to sell and move into something smaller. She refused, saying she wanted to create a home that would stand for generations. I think she would be pleased to see how you have honored that vision. That photograph now sits framed on my mantle, a reminder of Grandma's strength and independence. Beside it is a candid shot of her and me gardening together when I was about 12, both of us laughing as we dug in the soil. The most profound lesson I learned through this painful experience was about the true nature of inheritance. What Grandma left me was not just a house or material possessions, but values that had shaped her life: integrity, self-reliance, thoughtful decision-making, and the courage to stand firm when necessary. By defending those values against the pressure to compromise them, I had honored her legacy more truly than any other action could have. I also learned that family is defined not by obligation or shared DNA, but by mutual respect and support. My father and I built a healthier relationship precisely because we had both been forced to establish boundaries and examine unhealthy patterns. The family I lost through this conflict had been undermining my well-being for years through manipulation and emotional coercion. Painful as the rupture was, it freed me to build more authentic connections. Perhaps most importantly, I learned that genuine love does not come with conditions or price tags. It does not demand that you compromise your integrity or sacrifice your future security to prove your loyalty. It respects boundaries and wishes, even when they conflict with personal desires. As I sit on Grandma's porch swing now, My porch swing watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. I feel a sense of peace that seemed impossible during the height of the conflict. The house stands as a testament to choices made with integrity, rather than expediency, to valuing what is meaningful over what is merely profitable. What has your experience been? With family inheritance conflicts, has money or property ever revealed unexpected sides of people you thought you knew? Drop a comment below sharing your story, and if you found value in my experience, please hit that like button, subscribe to hear more real-life stories, and share this video with someone who might be facing similar family pressures. Remember, sometimes the most valuable inheritance is not what can be sold, but what can be preserved both in our physical spaces and in our character. Thank you for listening, and I wish you the wisdom to recognize the true value in your own inheritances, whatever form they may take.